Doing tonight?
Rough day.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's one of those Thursdays, hey?
Yeah. Bye. Happy Easter.
We have a great shirt on. I really like it.
Thank you.
And we also, everybody here likes you. So if it's a conflict, we're on your side.
Yep.
You know, it's a communication thing. You know, where people have, for one reason or another, withheld information and now expect to kind of be bailed out at the last minute.
Yes, I know that experience.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually the person that is on the offending side of that. I need someone, Felinda, bail me out. Yes, I remember somebody used to have a sign on their desk that said, "A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part."
Yeah.
That's a nice one.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that one.
So true. All right.
You ready to jump in? Welcome. So tonight we're going to talk about the Ruts worksheet, and we're going to talk about the executing themes. So I think we'll talk about the Ruts worksheet first. So I'd love to hear people's experience filling it out. How was it? And do you have any questions about it? Things along that line. Anything you want to say, really?
Yeah, I have it up on the screen, the Ruts worksheet. And the idea here was to kind of look at this. You know, we never want to start with this, by the way. We don't want to just jump right into Ruts. Felinda mentioned last time, however, that people often recognize their themes if they haven't connected with their themes. Sometimes it's the rut side of things that allows them to connect with it. Like they can see that, which can be useful because then it's a doorway into seeing how the theme really does fit for them. And then hopefully from the rut side, then if that's where they start, if that's where they can make their connection, then you can back them into the enabler side and the match side, the positive side of it. Although ideally we'd like to start with the positive side. So then the idea was to, you know, really look at each theme and how they cause a rut for you. And then in the bottom, looking at all of your 5 themes, what an uber rut or an overarching rut might be. I can talk about myself too, because this was very helpful for me. In fact, this is what led to this exercise. As I did it for myself, as I just said, what's my big problem? And maybe if I look at how each theme might run into problems, I could look at an overall pattern. And so my overall pattern with my themes of strategic, intellection, ideation, input, those themes combine to create this thing where I have way too many ideas. Like this is the bar of like maximum ideas, and this is my bar for output, execution, getting things done. So I have like really low level of execution, and it really describes my problem of so many ideas and not enough bandwidth to really get all those ideas out into reality. So I constantly feel dissatisfied because my ideas and concepts and things I want to do aren't really happening in the world around me. And so that helped me identify my Uber rut. And the value there then is once you have your Uber rut, you can begin to develop strategies to manage it and minimize the contrast of it. So just wanted to share that. And then, yeah, I'd like to hear from a couple of you of what your experience was of going through that.
I can start.
Great, thanks.
I didn't really have an issue coming up with challenges in each of the top 5, but I couldn't really come up with an Uber rut, so to speak. So maybe you can help with that if I go through my challenges for each theme.
Sure.
So for relator, I put uninterested in chit chat, which may come across as unfriendly. For maximizer, never fully satisfied. For harmony, withdraw when faced with chaos or drama. For achiever, with my eyes on the prize, I don't often stop to smell the roses and always come across as busy.
Mm-hmm.
And for responsibility, I put take on tasks that I may not trust others to do.
Very good. All right, so can you run through those real quick, those statements again for maximizer?
Never fully satisfied.
Okay, and harmony?
Withdraw when faced with chaos or drama.
Okay. Achiever? Not stopping to smell.
With eyes on the prize, don't often stop to smell the roses.
Okay. And responsibility.
Take on tasks that I may not trust others to do.
Great. So, sorry about the uneven font and all that. Don't grade me on format. I didn't plan on doing this. But yeah, let me just open up to the group. Do you see potential ways that these ruts intersect that might lead to an Uber rut?
I can see the relator and the achiever, and probably the harmony answer all possibly not being present in the moment.
Okay. Not being present in the moment. Good. What else?
Maybe the pressure of feeling overly driven when you combine some of those.
Good. I also hear a lack of satisfaction in the progress made. Even when progress is made. It's never enough.
Now, just to be really clear here, these are only when these are in a rut. So it's not that you live there. So when you're filling out your ruts, it's just you're taking a spotlight and taking time to look at that. It's just that when they do get into the rut, these are the feelings or thoughts or behaviors that emerge. So I just want to make sure, sometimes you might feel like one of yours is always in a rut, and that's a good place to work. But it's important to know that this can slide into that and you can recognize that, but then you can pull it back out to get back to that enabler side when you do recognize this state of mind or feeling.
Yep. I also want to add one too about maybe others not feeling that I'm approachable. Even if that's not true, your themes might, communicate that. Interested in chit chat, withdrawal when faced with chaos, maybe not trusting others.
Do any of those sound like it might feel like an Uber rut to you or overarching, Kendra?
Yeah, I would say that what you all said rings true at some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And doing this rut exercise, the enabler exercise I wasn't able to do when I was on vacation, but now I want to go back and do the other one. I think it'll be easier now.
Good.
Yes, it's always, you're going to find time and time again I think I've said this, probably 10 times so far, but everyone's going to want to go here first, and they're going to find this the easiest to do because we just kind of have that predisposition in our culture and minds. So take that energy, yes, and go back to the enablers, and everyone could take that advice actually. But you'll find when you're working with clients, this is just the beeline for this. And it's not such a bad thing because, like Adam said, and like we talked about last week, it will help them connect, but just be very careful that they don't stay here or live here, or they do something constructive with it, because you'll see it over and over.
Good. Yeah, I probably shouldn't be messing around with the colors, but I can't help it.
Adam found a new tool, you guys.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just very helpful just to kind of take accounting, you take stock, and just say, all right, well, what strategies could I begin to employ to balance this out? Because that's really what we're trying to do here. Is we're not trying to leave people stuck with, all these negative things and I can't handle it. We want people to start to feel like they can make some progress and experience satisfaction from life. I don't know. I keep messing around. I'm sorry about the phone.
Well, and I think that just to totally support what you're saying is that you can use this to identify some strategies to find the satisfaction. So, all right, achiever, now I know my rut is I don't stop to smell the roses. Well, maybe, I think I even said this in the video, you can actually schedule that in on your list to take time to smell the roses, and specifically how to do that. You can specifically employ things you want to work on. I would advise not doing it all at once, but maybe picking one at a time to just kind of focus on. That's one of the things I did when I first went through this. I just picked one for a week, and I thought about that one for a week, and then tried to see what would get me out of that rut and to recognize the pattern, and then the next week picked a different one. So, do whatever works for you that way, but you'll catch and correct these a lot faster once they're identified. And I'll just say a quick word about the quick sheets. Those are not meant to be fully exhaustive, obviously. They're short. They're made to get you thinking. So when you're working with clients or people in any capacity, if something doesn't resonate, if you look at that rut and you're like, oh, that's not me, that's not meant to be a definitive statement. So just use that to say, okay, well then what might that generate about, if the responsibility quick sheet definition of the rut is not your rut, how do you feel it might get into that rut? So usually people will use that as springboard as long as they don't feel too locked in.
Belinda, could you say what you mean by quick sheet real quick?
Yes, well, the ruts, any quick sheet that we have, and it was posted with this, we have a ruts one, we have an enablers, we have quite a few of them actually, all in the T2S resource library. It's just a really one-page document with all 34 themes in a sentence or two so that you just have a quick reference. It's super helpful in a workshop. It's super helpful when you're introducing this stuff to people. Just to have it all in one place so they can look at their own, and then sometimes, well, you have, I have maximizer and you have activator. Well, what's yours? So it's just a nice way to get conversation started, to get application started. So you will probably refer to those quite a bit, should you so choose to use these worksheets.
So here I put up an example of like the Ruts quick sheet. It's not a worksheet because there's nothing to write on here. It's a handout or a tool. Now, so like for achiever, we would say lack of downtime to reflect, celebrate, connect with others, potential to take on too much or burnout. So what you will also find this statement under theme anatomy for that theme. So it's just a sheet that just takes out pulls together the rut statements for each theme. I use this less and less now that I use theme anatomy, because it kind of has the enablers in there, the ruts in there, sample patterns in there, match, mismatch. So it has all of it in there. But if you just want to focus on ruts, then the quick sheet here is what it looks like. All right, good.
Thank you for sharing, Kendra. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Really, it's not easy to talk about those things, but we need to, because this is the stuff that shows up in our interactions in the workplace, in our relationships, that we just need to be aware of and manage them better. And that's really the key. Is you can manage any one of these, any one of these, issues. So I want to even show you another example from one of our past participants. So, for intellection, her rut is spend too much time in my head and not enough action, zero action. Connectedness, stretch connectivity too much sometimes, where things are, they're really a coincidence. There's not really a connection. So reading too much into things. Responsibility, same shared with you, take on things mentally when I don't need to. And so here, again, for her, it's mental, taking things on. And then strategic, always planning ahead for best way to do things when, it doesn't allow for spontaneity. And learner, happy to just soak up information. Again, no action. So you can see that. And so her Uber rut was to move from one thing to another, don't take enough time to master something, think about things and projects to get it right, but not taking action. So that self-awareness then, says, okay, what strategies can I begin to use to overcome them? So what are some strategies? I'm hearing a pretty good amount of background noise. Not sure where it's coming from. All right, that's good. Thanks. So yeah, any strategies for how you might deal with this, manage it better?
Well, as someone who has intellection, actually, a lot of this is what I have in my, at least my top 10, because I did get my full 34. And so what I've learned to do, specifically like with the intellection and the learner, which is really what I enjoy doing. But then, it's just like this, right? You realize after you've done all that there's just been, you haven't accomplished a thing. So I put myself on a time limit. I bought a kitchen timer. And so I can set this, for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It sits in my drawer. When it rings, I'm done. I got to move on to the next thing, because otherwise I'll literally spend the entire day just, reading and learning, reading articles, and which is great. But, at the end of the day, I have to produce something at some point. So, that's about, that's a rut for me, right? Is, just kind of getting into that. So I have to keep myself out of the ditch.
I super sympathize with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So like you identified a kitchen timer to put a time limit on it so that it doesn't run away from you. All that time doesn't run away. What are some other things to help manage this? Not getting enough done. What might be a strategy that someone could use to help, get more done?
I know a big one for responsibility, because I have yet to meet someone with responsibility who doesn't feel this in the rut. Sure, they're out there, but it really shows up that, they often are the first ones to say yes because somebody says something needs to be done, and they feel like they are responsible for stepping up and taking care of it if nobody else will. So a strategy to manage that, which actually could get in the way of getting things done because you have too much to do and you feel very responsible for doing it all, and it's weighing on you. So actually to take things off the plate, practice not speaking up when somebody asks, hey, can anyone do this for me? I need this. Practice saying no if it doesn't align with, your time frame or your goals. It's really hard for someone at first, but after a while, well, someone with responsibility, I know it's hard. But after a while, that plate management starts to just get easier, and you start to recognize, like, if I do take that on, I'm going to get back into that rut, so I'm not going to, and here's why. And you can even really clearly explain that to your group or your other people. You're not just saying no to be kind of rejecting the responsibility of that task. You're saying no because you are feeling very protective of the other tasks that need to get done. So that's one I just would offer for responsibility.
Yeah. And developing these strategies is helpful for you, but also for, like, if you want to help develop other people, maybe you don't have responsibility, but maybe somebody else does. And maybe you tell them, Felinda's idea of practicing not raising your hand or volunteering. I for some reason, I keep thinking about this whisper dolls or worry dolls, where you whisper to them what your worries are. And like, that's a holding place. Other people have used like little jars where you write on a piece of paper what your concern or worry is, and then you just put it in there in the jar, and that's where it goes. If you have responsibilities that really, you shouldn't be taking on, so that you can use your responsibility for the things that matter most. Does anybody else want to go ahead, Flynn?
I'm looking at people in the room to see if any of the executing ruts we haven't covered. Belief is, I think, the only one we haven't touched on with the people that are here that are executing themes. So maybe, Teresa, if you have, I know you might be on mute or driving, but do you want to share what you feel like a rut might be around belief?
Give me just a second, I will pull over.
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Thank you. You don't have to do that, though. We could come back to it.
It may take a little bit. Y'all need to go on because I'm not at an exit I can pull over.
Okay. Well, we can always come back to it, and also don't even worry. Don't stop for just that. But actually, now would be a good time to pull up the Belief Chibi, the little manga comic we've been working on. We just finished Belief. And so, Teresa, since you're on the phone and you don't know what I'm talking about yet, go to the blog when you get a chance and take a look at the Belief comic that's up there. And I'd love to hear at some point when you get a chance to do that if that resonates with you. Adam, are you pulling that up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to go to our website to get it if it's in the blog. Yeah.
So I just think it'd be fun to show the rut of belief on the comic and kind of talk through it a little bit. So that kind of gets us into the executing themes, but we can stay on the topic of the Ruts worksheet. I just want to make sure we do cover the executing themes tonight. So what you often will see, because the good old domains, is you'll hear, and some of them, like achiever, like discipline, are very task-oriented. So you'll see the ruts often expressed through a task-oriented lens. But keep in mind, this can influence relationships. It can influence the way you think, as we saw with the responsibility one. So just keep in mind that don't limit it to that specific label of the domain. We just keep wanting to put that in there, and help your clients expand past that too if you can. So if somebody expresses a rut, but you've also heard them express, or they need maybe to develop a relationship core concept or something you're coaching them through, you can examine that rut a little closer and ask, okay, well, how does that behavior influence relationships? Something like that. So just keep that in mind. And here is the Adventures of Belief So we've taken our icons. We talked about this a little bit. These are going to come bit by bit, but we're up to belief, and it's just another way to illustrate for the learning. So belief is basically helping her friends prepare for a storm, and she has a very strong belief. That's the storyline in this comic. And they will take actions. If you remember, I was talking about this before, they will take very specific actions that support their values and beliefs. So that's one of the reasons I believe they did group it into the executing themes. You'll get that question often, why is belief in here? And so, you know, that is, so you can scroll up a little bit, Adam, to the ruts. So here she's saving her friends, that's command. She's getting everyone into the storm shelter. So sometimes the rut of belief, I'll just read it since I know Teresa's driving. In certain cases, someone high in the belief theme can dig in pretty firmly. Someone who is friendly and easygoing can suddenly appear rigid and inflexible. And that means you've run into one of their beliefs. You bumped up against it in a way that they don't feel comfortable with. People high in belief may find themselves standing alone, and the rest of the world does not necessarily subscribe to the same beliefs, and this can be a source of inner tension, potentially. So a good question for belief, if this is a rut that one finds oneself in, is to ask herself, is this a hill to die on? Some things definitely deserve taking a stand for, but others may allow more wiggle room once belief has taken the time to understand other perspectives and consider the greater good. One thing I would suggest that you might see a rut with belief is that they can get very, and I'm definitely not saying this about you, Teresa, I've seen it with other people with belief. They can, if someone tries to talk them out of something that they're very firmly, you know, this does not have anything to do with religion, potentially, it can be anything. If someone's trying to talk them out, they can get a little bit defensive or have that rigidity around it. And that's something that, Adam, if you scroll down, I think we included that in the bullet points. That's something that you can communicate to other people, ask them what they believe and why they believe it. As long as someone understands with belief that they're not trying to change, you know, no one should try to change someone's core belief anyway, but especially with someone with belief, obviously, it's not going to work. So, but just to maybe redirect that conversation if you find that is a rut with someone you're working with belief. Any questions about that?
This is Teresa. I can tell you how that's played out in my life and my career. I had it explained to me why I stayed in the last two jobs I did as long as possible. I mean, way longer than I should have. Almost to the point that it actually made me literally physically ill. It's because I believe so much in what the mission of it was a foundation where we gave money to nonprofits. And I've been in the nonprofit arena most of my career, and I really, really believed in the mission of the organization, even though my role in that was not me. It was me doing computer work. It got me away from people, and my supervisor and I didn't get along very well. And but I stayed partly because of my belief in what I thought they should do. I mean, I believed in what we were doing. So finally you get to the point where literally physically ill, losing weight because I couldn't keep any food down. I had to make a decision to get out. The other part of that too, when you're talking about beliefs, because it talks about coming across as, you know, as stubborn, because I also have the input and the learner as my top 5. I also tend to think, okay, well, what am I not seeing? What other information do I need to have? How does this connect with everything else? Because connectedness is one of my top things too. So that's kind of like how they all kind of interplay in dealing with the beliefs. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to change my belief, but it does make me question because of those other top themes.
Very good. Yeah, I think the right in that story you shared kind of like an enabler side and a rut side. Like an enabler side of belief is that it allows you to really persevere and stick with things. People with belief don't just, you know, change. That's kind of why part of the image for belief is this anchor. There's a stability, but then also you pointed out that sometimes you stay with something too long that might undermine your health or well-being. Or just overall happiness. So it's when do you release that anchor, and so that's when we talk about interrupting a theme. So sometimes in some situations our themes are a match, and then in other situations they're a mismatch, and that's a great example. You gave both match and mismatch with that story.
You also will see that, so that I thank you so much for sharing, Teresa. You might see that same behavior in a rut and restorative, staying with something too long, actually developer as well, but we're talking about more executing themes tonight, but staying with something too long because of either the potential for developer or the value system, the work they're doing, like Teresa mentioned with belief about the foundation. Restorative, you know what it could be, and if you just put more work into it, it could, be back to its original grandeur. So making that distinction, if you catch yourself in that rut, kind of going back to like, is this the hill to die on? Is this reality going to, really get me? Am I my best self in this space? So that is one for all three of those. Just to kind of flag if you see maybe kind of someone pouring themselves too much into something that just isn't quite, maybe the organizational culture is not there, or any number of reasons. Before we kind of, we've transitioned now into talking more generally about the executing themes. Does anyone have any particular questions about any specific theme after watching the video, or just something you wanted to ask?
With belief, I wondered, so a lot of belief I see in Appalachian culture, and I wondered if themes can come out regionally.
Good question. So Gallup is a little on the fence. There's kind of like even a gender, like are certain themes more common in women than men, and everybody takes a pretty specific stance on it. And I don't have a firm answer. I think Adam can speak to this a little more. I think that those values can be cultivated, and so you might see more of a prevalence, but I don't know that there are any hard numbers on that.
I don't know of any either.
And if there are, they're not really releasing them. But what you might see is kind of like, definitely in a culture or region, values are either sort of, it's a positive thing or it's a negative thing. And so people will definitely show up with more of those values, but it may not necessarily reflect their themes, which is kind of interesting. So if you do have some anecdotal evidence of it showing up a lot, that'd be really interesting to know.
Well, we are going to do it as a department sometime this year, so I can do my own non-scientific study of people who were born here, people who are transplants, and see how things show up.
I think that'd be really interesting. We have one person who went through this course, taking her team through it. It's 11 people. They all have connectedness, every last one of them.
Wow.
And so I'm like, cannot wait until they get a little further in. We've just been kind of talking a little bit. I was like, I have to know, like, what is that like? So I do think certain themes can gravitate towards certain cultures. I mean, that would be a great example. But again, it's, it's anecdotal.
I would say by definition, culture permeates and infects other people. Like we're picking up the culture. I don't know that would affect their StrengthsFinder results, but it might affect their behavior. I mean, I think culture could do a lot to manage my themes or override them or frustrate them, but I think I can see how a culture might have certain qualities, but the individuals in it may not demonstrate it in their themes, but they may practice it because that's kind of how culture works. It culture causes you to behave in certain ways, and you're like, why do I do this? Why do I, take my shoes off when I come in the house or not, and things like that.
One thing I will say is that you will find like organizational cultures, exactly what Adam's saying, like there can be both a match and a mismatch for certain themes. So that is something as you're working on coaching somebody, if they're inside, I did talk about this a little bit last time, I think, if they're inside a culture that is just not valuing, like let's say, somebody with achiever is inside a culture that is just very dysfunctional and will not allow them to get anything done, that's going to be an extremely frustrating situation for them. And sometimes that culture can be changed and sometimes it cannot. And so it's important as you're working with somebody, if they're in a culture that's just such an extreme mismatch, the answer might actually be finding a different culture to plug into that's more supportive of their themes. It may not have to be quite so drastic as all that, but I have seen that happen. So something to consider.
Okay.
And then my other question, or kind of comment when looking at the Executing Themes video, is I feel like it was a lot of things that you get taught when you first start a job, as these are the things we value. And I wondered, and I think we've talked about this, like, do people stay with those themes, or as the demands, change, do they change with them? And I know the answer is no, but processing that.
Well, and it's not a hard and fast no. I actually think it is a soft yes. It's sort of like, it's a tricky one because, again, that's when everybody's has these kinds of very strong opinions within the Strengths Finder, community. Like, no, your first themes are always your themes. But I actually do think as you go through life, some things you are developing. And so, you might have something in your top 10 that bumps up and to your top 5. I think you've seen that based on, just any number of things. So I think I mentioned this before, but I'll say it if I didn't with this group. It's that I have a friend who, she is a facilitator with this work, and she has taken it, I think, 3 times. And she says she's a top 8 because she still identifies very strongly with all those. And she claims them all because she says, this is my operating, this is how I function. But some of these have creeped up in there, and it's all because of my, work experience. I agree, though, that especially the executing themes, some of it is that, achiever is isn't achiever the most common one, Adam?
It is.
Okay, I thought so. I just want to make sure. You'll see, because our culture does value. So it is a nature-nurture thing. Some of this is nature, some of this is nurture. We can't really parse them completely apart. But our culture does value these things, achiever, responsibility. So you will see them being more prevalent. And I do think that is definitely true. Yeah, does that answer your question? Because that's a tricky one. It's murky. That's where the social science is not a hard and fast science.
Yeah, I mean, when going through the executing, I'm like, yeah, this is who I want on my team. For those all the work my team does is kind of that entry level stuff. And I feel like as I've seen, who I had 10 years ago, they might have been really strong in their executing themes, but I've seen them grow in things that now I think they have, it's more than just they've learned how to do it. They have a passion for it, but they didn't know how to influence people at 22. but at 38, okay, I don't know somebody that age gap, but you know, at that level now they know how to use their influencing more than they did back then.
Absolutely. And I think that comes through life experience, through maturity, and just as people grow into themselves too, like they might have never known that was something they enjoyed until they had a chance to, you know, practice that. So I do think that there is, I mean, I personally don't plan on taking it again just because I think that, you know, at this point, I know enough about the themes that I feel like, oh, I'm pulling on that, or I'm going to pull that one up and use it here. It's a good time if you have that question come up in a workshop to really reinforce everybody has all 34. It's not that you don't have the other ones, and that if, you know, we don't know the spread, you know, maybe someone's 34, all like really close together, which is probably not true, but just saying to people, like, don't be limited, like really develop your top 5, because those are, you know, kind of your lead horses. But you may have, like, you know, you've got a few sets of horses behind those horses, and you can develop those qualities. So I personally love this idea that we do have all 34 and that it's not exclusive. It's one of the things that drew me to this particular assessment over some of the others, because I do believe there's room for growth inside of it. And it doesn't say like, well, you know, people will start with the like, oh, I don't have this. Well, yeah, they do. It's just not something they may lead with at that time. Adam, do you want to add anything? Because I know that's one.
Yeah, well, this is where I'd like to talk about a weird idea. Well, sometimes, depending on the group and depending on my mood, I talk about the 34 themes as an invisible musculature. So if you pull up the word musculature in Google and then you go to images, it'll pull up like an anatomy of all the different muscles with its labels on it, you know, your biceps and triceps and other muscles I don't know the names of. Because we're human, we have all those muscles. I mean, it's part of the human blueprint to genetically, at least most of the time, have all those muscles. But if you look at somebody, you'll see that, wow, that person's musculature is developed differently from that person's musculature. Like this person's a ballerina and their musculature is very different from that person who's a construction worker. And, you know, you see it in the different parts of their body. If you ever see a cyclist and their thighs, you know, or a gymnast or an arm wrestler will have one little skinny arm and one real big arm, you know? And so I think of our themes that way. We have all the muscles, but we've just developed some of them to a much greater degree. And so that's one way I talk about themes. I don't know what you think about that, but that's what this made me think of.
I like that because you can, I think in communicating it, you can say, hey, I know you don't love this theme, but you got to pull out your woo, or you got to pull out, you know, this theme is what the time calls for, and we all have it. It's, you know, the authenticity of it, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I just want to say too, it's kind of like, is there any of these themes that you wouldn't want to have if someone was using their themes appropriately? Are there any themes that you wouldn't benefit from having on your team? And then, right. And then every one of the themes could be used in a way where it's like, I don't want that around. Like achiever, like, wow, you are no fun at all. And you're like, you're going to burn out and you're burning everyone else out. And, you know, like you could take any theme when taken to an extreme and not want it around, or, you know, feel the sting of it. Whereas anything that's very mature and well developed, there's always a benefit from it. So it's about loving all the themes and seeing the value in all of them. Whenever you feel a client or an employee, you know, pulling away, like, I don't like that theme. No, it's kind of like all of them have value. So
one of the things I particularly like to do with Achiever, but I do it with all of them, is because it is a really nice way to get to know somebody. is if I know somebody has one of the themes, I'll ask them how it shows up for them. But when it's an achiever, I will ask them about their lists or any special ways they like to organize things, because I am always endlessly fascinated because I don't have it very high. And I even had an achiever say to me, like, what? You don't make lists? Like, how do you even survive? You know? But I will ask them to show me. Like, it's not something somebody will ask unless it's an achiever talking to another achiever. They don't get a chance to share that. And it's usually a really great logical system. And it's a really cool thing to see the workings of somebody's, like the way they plan their day. And I don't know. So I enjoy when, like, getting people to share the way that it shows up for them specifically with me. So just something to kind of think about. Another one I'll do is I'll ask if an achiever makes a list when they go on vacation, and what did they put on their list? Because that'll show me what they want to do on their vacation and what they value. Any other, well, I don't want to cut you off, Lauren. Did you have another question around? So any other questions about any of the specific executing themes?
I have a question about responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I know someone who has adaptability number 2 and responsibility number 4. And neither of us have really connected him to that responsibility theme. Like, adaptability makes sense, but responsibility not so much. So what does raw responsibility look like?
Well, if we read, I don't have the document up. I could pull it up, but it would. Well, yeah, let's just do it. But I would say it might not look like this guy at all. I'm guessing based on what you're describing that this person is. You're not seeing them being very responsible. Is that kind of right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Not responsible. Achiever.
Oh, okay.
Adaptability and achiever.
Yeah. So according to Kurt Liesveld, who developed this approach of raw and mature, he would say achiever would say, I must keep busy doing anything. And a mature achiever would say, I must produce the needed results. So one is about being busy for the sake of being busy, and one is about really aiming it toward some specific outcomes.
And yeah, and what you might be seeing, and you'll have to tell me if this is accurate, but because his adaptability is higher, adaptability often kind of needs to be called into action from external forces, either things that need doing or people that need something. What is that moment? You know, it's different than a ranger, but it's like, what is that moment, you know, call for? They don't love planning usually. So most achievers do enjoy a good plan and do enjoy a good list. I think someone with that adaptability, their achiever might show up in that they might need help pointing it into specific tasks, because they may not have their own sense of this needs to be done today. They might actually have, so one thing that we don't talk about achievers, often they will have a lot of stamina for tasks that other people just don't have. Like Focus has it, often Maximizer does too, but like some of the themes, like if you put me in a room with an achiever working on a task, I'm going to need a lot more breaks than an achiever usually does. So that stamina is another place it might show up if it doesn't look like it's showing up in the goals, goal setting. Someone with adaptability might actually shy away from setting goals because that locks them in and they don't like that. So am I speaking to anything about this person's personality that once they get started, they have stamina?
Yeah, that actually helps a lot because I was always thinking achiever would be self-motivated, driven, and maybe that's not necessarily the case with this person. If they are given the task, then they do have the stamina and will keep busy with tasks that are thrown at them through adaptability, but they're not coming up with that list on their own. So that does make sense, actually.
Good, because yeah, that's something, because most achievers do it on their own that you'll see, but if that's not happening, that's a great thing to do, is look to those other ones and see how you can trigger. Like if you're not seeing achiever just running on its own steam, see how you can trigger it through another theme. So that's kind of
Thank you.
Oh, sure. That's actually fun. I think that's a really fun process.
Yeah, we definitely enjoy kind of like breaking that down. Another thought on that is with adaptability, sounds like it's higher than the achiever. I could see that adaptability, they like to stay in ready mode, you know, like they're constantly being situationally aware, constantly refreshing what's going on in life. So if they're busy buried in their to-do list, their adaptability isn't in ready mode. So I would say that maybe this person responds best to tasks that are needed in the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any of the other themes that you have questions about or observations about?
Something, I don't know if fun is the right word, but something I realized is I've always, and Adam, I think you might have even mentioned this earlier, with individualization, I've very strong in me. I've always thought consistency was kind of an opposite. But when consistency was being talked about, I actually think consistency is fairly high with me also.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fun playing in my head with not looking at that as a teeter-totter, but playing with how those can play together and meet common ground within myself, and then looking at if somebody did have it, how they would perceive me and how I would perceive them.
So like you don't have you're talking about consistency and individualization. Do you have consistency high?
I feel when you were going over it, it really resonated with me.
Okay.
Like I would say top 15.
Yeah.
It felt like top 15.
Right. So you go ahead, please.
So I think what I, kind of how I came to how does that work? Is I like consistency to have the bordered box, but then within the box, individualize, okay, how do I get someone from here to fit within the box, or
right.
play happily in the box? Like we can bounce around in the box, but we have to stay in the box and ensure the box is clearly understood.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, because I think that would be a good example of how those two might balance each other's ruts, having those two play together.
Yeah. And just a little bit of a different idea too. I think your maximizer in communication could look like consistency. Because communication loves to make sure message sent equals message received. Consistency likes to make sure everybody knows the rules. And maximizer is, I don't want to doink around here. I want to get stuff done. I want it to be the best it can be. So as long as all the rules are clear and we're all moving toward the best, then within that we can individualize.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's your maximizer. You might have consistency high too. I don't know that. But when I see maximizer number one, I'm like, yeah, it's like, all right, maybe it's not about fairness that drives you, but it's about, we got to stay organized and follow the game plan so we can be at our best.
Any other questions or comments about any of the other specific executing themes?
responsibility made me think of college group work, and that it made me think of that's the person that always did all the work in college group work.
That's right.
It's so funny you should say that, because I have a friend who went back to school a little later. You know, she had gone through and then she went back for another degree, and she was in her 40s, and you know, most of the other students were not. She was on a group, and she has responsibility, and that exact thing happened. And you know, I would get the phone call like, no one's doing anything, I'm doing it all. And I was like, well, did you let anyone help you? Are you volunteering for all of it? Well, they weren't doing it right. And I'm not gonna stand up and turn in something. I was just laughing. I was like, yeah. But absolutely, that just happened last semester for her. It's funny.
Yeah, one thing too I want to say is, while we're looking at executing themes, it's just a reminder that these themes could be used to build relationships. Any one of them, any one of these themes could be used to influence other people. Any one of these themes could be used to think and problem solve and innovate, and so in the thinking realm. So yeah, just a reminder of that as well.
Absolutely. Like responsibility, for example, I have a friend with that, and I relax in her presence because I know she's already thought of like what needs to be done, and she's on it. And she just fosters a really deep sense of trust in me. And I know in other people in her life too, like you'll see that for some of these, like discipline. You can count on a person with discipline in a way that you might not be able to count on anyone else for like certain things happening the way they need to happen. You know, that's maybe an extreme statement, but they're on the process, believe me. Focus, if I know someone with focus and they're like in their realm, I just, you know, I can see them. It doesn't have to be a task. They can be focused on developing a relationship or focused on doing something with somebody. So you'll see that time and again. So I think that's such an important point.
And another thing too is that these all do not go about executing in a way that looks similar even, you know. So that's why I question, you know, the 4-domain kind of configuration and just plugging the themes in here. Like, I think deliberative is kind of shoehorned into execution. It could have been moved into the thinking realm pretty easily. I don't want to make mistakes. What problems can I anticipate? How can I think through this in a mental rough draft before I actually have to go about and do it, and maybe look foolish or something, you know? So execution-wise, what is it? It's a very slow execution thing.
Yeah, you might think someone with deliberative they don't execute quickly, like Adam said, and it could be put in the relationship building. Like they're going to be careful about their risks in the relationships. They're going to think about it for other people. You know, deliberative is an interesting one because if you're looking at pairing like achievers, often, not always, like we just talked about, but deliberative almost looks still in comparison sometimes.
And belief, like why is belief in execution? Probably because it just didn't fit in the other 3 categories too well. Because belief, I'll execute when it's in accordance with my beliefs, and people with belief are able to marshal their energies, even if they're tired, when it's for a cause, you know. But other than that, there's nothing inherent about belief executing. So, you know, it's just a way to think about it. Focus could be about focusing on a task, but it could also, I think focus to me also looks a lot like intellection, you know, in that it's about really blocking out distractions, wanting to go deep onto a task, really focusing. And So yeah, discipline, it's not particularly about I want to get things done. It's about I want to eliminate chaos. I want to have order, and I will take action to do that. And if I have everything in order, then I can execute better. And even achiever, it's not about I want to get things done. It's about I want to accomplish things. It's about the achievement rather than the act of achieving, but I'm willing to do the achieving in order to get to the achievement. So restorative, they don't want to just sit around fixing things. Well, they do want to sit around fixing things. But I mean, if it's not broke, does that mean they're going to fix it? You know, like, do they have anything to execute on if it's not about restoring something? So it's just an interesting way to think about the words. Execution could just lead you to think about them in a very concrete way, and they're not. They're very fluid and dynamic, and they could all be turned toward relationships, accomplishing things in relationships, or arranging things so the relationship goes more smoothly, you know. And it could be about influencing, like, hey, this is my belief, and this is why it matters, and this is why we have to have ethics, or whatever, you know, the person's talking about. So that's influential. Consistency could say, hey, this is not fair. This isn't right. And that could be very influential. So yeah, just to be more fluid with thinking about the themes.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on our time, so I want to cover the homework for tomorrow. Homework for next week, which will be watch the thinking themes video, and you won't have any handouts to fill out unless you need to catch up, but try to finish up the coin videos. We'd like to talk a little bit more about that model, which you'll be really familiar with once you're done with the videos. But that will be your main push for next week. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Have you guys started to make progress on the coin videos? Okay.
Yeah,
I
was on the second one.
Okay. Observe, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, just keep
just on the first.
Yeah, that's okay. We know those are long. We are planning to, hopefully by the next group, and then you guys will have access to this. We're working on making the foundations course, the online foundations course. I'm not quite sure when it'll be done, but it'll be something you could do at your own pace. It'll be chunked down smaller, and it'll be basically going through the coin model. So that is to come. You'll have access to that in the future, but just try to plow through those videos because that is your primary, that is a framework that you will use with your clients. It's the most direct, logical way to progress them through. And so you'll want to be really familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's great. You could use it in a coaching capacity or even a mentoring or managing capacity, and you could use it in a group training or facilitation capacity. It's just that coin model is just a great way to take someone through StrengthsFinder. I've taken StrengthsFinder, now what? Take them to the coin model. Yep. Exactly.
Sometimes teams will break it down into like spreading it over a bunch of staff meetings, like doing one at a time or a portion of one at a time. So we've seen that a lot. Any other questions though? I want to respect people's time frames.
And when you were talking about what's in executing, one that stands out of why I'm curious why it's not in executing is adaptability.
Right.
Good question.
Yep. It's a great question. Why isn't adaptability in the executing realm? And the answer to that is because the 4 domains is not really the way Don Clifton would have divided up the 34 themes. He wouldn't have divided them up, or else he he would have divided them up. So, right, exactly. Why is adaptability about relation? Maybe adaptabilities are jerks and they're hard to get along with, you know? So, no, I'm kidding. But adaptability is like, oh, they're very amenable to other things and to the situations. So, yeah, they're pretty easygoing and easy to get along with. But I get frustrated with adaptability. It's my number 6 theme. I get frustrated if people are just sitting there just waiting for something to happen. It's like, you gotta, bring more to the table and be a little more, what's the word? Proactive. If it's just on its own, not really taking action.
And I actually hack Adam's adaptability number 6 a lot to accomplish tasks. So like, I'll be like, we need this right now. And I know he has like, time to do it. And he's like, yes, great. I'll go do it. Here it is. And it's like, we do that all the time. So, I specifically use it as an executing theme for him.
Yep. And I welcome it too. It feels good. It's like, because I don't want to have to worry about something in the future, but to do something now, I'm designed for that, So I welcome it. And my number 7, or is it my 8? My number 8 is activator. So something to be said for those 6 through 10 themes. If you're finding yourself like not able to get what you need from somebody's top 5, maybe then you say, let's do your full 34 and see what else is up near the top that I could hack into.
But that's such a great and observant question, because why isn't adaptability in there when a ranger is? So yeah, you'll see that so many of these, like developer, that's often used as an executing theme.
Sure. Yep. I mean, people with empathy would take action on an emotion, or people with harmony will take action to preserve peace between people. So, I know I'm on a soapbox about it, and I don't really mean to just trash the 4 domains, because I do think I know it's been useful for me to kind of like group them broadly, speaking, into 4 groups and 4 colors. It's helpful to learn my way around the 34 themes. But what I see, and what I guess why I speak so strongly about this, is I see way too much embracing of the 4 domains in a way that diminishes people's ability to benefit from the tool, which is kind of like the prime directive. You want StrengthsFinder to be a positive thing and a developmental thing, not a limiting thing, not a thing that makes people go, well, I don't have any executing. I guess in this execution biased culture we live in, I don't matter, And that's not true, and it's not fair, and it's not in the spirit of what this is all about. So that's why, I'm going to speak a little bit more firmly about not being beholden to the 4 domains.
I have a follow-up with that. So I think it was beginning of the executing one, you said that both of you don't have any executing, and that's why you found it fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you think it's people who don't have those things, it's easier to talk about because you see it from the outsider perspective, and that people with them have more trouble talking about them because it's just internal workings? Thoughts on that?
I don't have one. Go ahead, Belinda.
It's a good question, because I think it goes both ways. But specifically, often if you don't have something, you can usually spot it in someone else's behavior pretty easily. Like if someone has deliberative and you don't, it's my last one. I guess I shouldn't say I don't, but it's very low on the list. I can spot somebody's deliberative from a mile away, and they may or may not, like they might be in it a little bit more. Often you'll see that come up around some of the, call them maybe quieter themes, like not maybe as external. Someone will be like, okay, I read this. Like I was talking to somebody yesterday with learner, and she's like, learner, the description fit me to a T, but she was kind of like, I don't know what else. Yeah, I love to learn, but it was almost like, I don't know what else to do with that because it's so deeply ingrained in her. Where I do have learner. And for me, I'm like, when I first started, yeah, I thought about learner as that very specific application, but now I know, oh, I can use learner to get stuff done, and I can do this and this and this with learner. So it might be easier to, like, if you have it, you might not know quite how to expand it as easily verbally. I do think, though, often somebody will be able to speak to, like, most of their top 5, but there'll be like 1 or 2 that feel a little nebulous. Like a lot of times you'll hear people like, I don't know about input. Like, I've got input, but I'm not really sure how that shows up. But if you don't have it, or you know, like once you guys get through this stuff, you will be spotting it and you'll be like, oh, that's input. And here's this, and this you can do, you know, and how it might show up. Is that answering your question? Because that's a good one. And I think that you'll hear it often just based on the person. Like my mom, I think I might have already told the story, so stop me if my mom took it. She at first was like, I don't know about these. I don't think these are me. And I'm like, Mom, it was the way she phrased the question. She's like, I don't think I do this, this, and this. I was like, well, the way you just phrased that question, all of your themes are in there in that one sentence. And we were laughing. And then she'll often, as a joke now, be like, all of the other ones are my number 6. I have all of the other ones as 6. You know? So she's very funny about like, well, why don't I have this one? I was like, you do, remember? So you'll just see, I think, that certain people will connect very strongly with some, and some will just feel super elusive. And sometimes that's because they're very close, or just because they may not have quite grasped the full definition. One thing you'll often see is they'll be like, oh, I have responsibility, but they'll just limit it to what that word means. And so you'll have to help them expand past that.
I want to try something real quick too. I'm going to share this. I'm going to show you an image, and if you've seen it before, don't spoil it. But I'm going to ask you what this is and see if you can see it. So, any thoughts on what this is?
I have seen that before.
Looks like a bat hanging upside down.
So the reason I'm showing you this is because I think people's themes work this way, where it's like, I can't really see it right away once they take StrengthsFinder. Like, okay, I know what the words mean, and yeah, I could kind of see it and I kind of can't. But then once they see it, they won't be able to not see it, or they'll be able to see it more readily. So this is actually a cowboy, and half of his face is shaded on this side.
Whoa.
And you can see his eyes, and you can see his nose, like right here, and his mouth. You see the hat, the shape of the hat, right?
Yeah.
When I first saw this, I could not figure out what it was either. I'm like, yeah, like you, I was like some insect or something. And now, like, it's so obvious to me. And I think our themes work that way, you know, where right away I'm like, I think that I see a shape in there, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's it, there it is, bop, right there. So, and I know that Teresa, you can't see this, but so you could check it on the video later. But do you guys see? Was that a good point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then my point self-esteem is higher. But yeah, this is how our themes are. We can learn to see them more clearly once we get acclimated to it. All right. So I know, if anybody has any other questions, we could stick around, but we really do want to be sensitive to your time, and we love doing this, but we also don't want to wear you out. This is what, session 7?
Yep.
Yes.
So we're over the halfway point.
Oh, good job, guys.
Yeah. All right, with that, we'll I'll stop the record, but if anybody has any questions they want to stick around for, please feel free to do so. So, goodbye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
you.
Drive safe.
Have a good week.
All right.
You too. I hope that the rest of the week is better.
If you need anything at all, let us know.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.